My aunt drugged my wine at my cousin's wedding to frame me as psychotic, and now they are suing me for $50,000 to finish the job. I woke up restrained in a hospital bed thinking I had lost my mind, only to realize I had actually lost my entire life to a family of predators. While I was unconscious, my cousin Sarah sent me an invoice for ruining her big day. But the real theft happened years ago. I just found a wedding photo where Sarah is wearing the sapphire necklace that vanished from my mother's body the night she died. The same necklace my aunt swore to God was lost in the crash. They have gaslit me for 2 years, stealing my sanity and my inheritance. And now they are at my door with legal papers to lock me away in a conservatorship before I can speak the truth. My hands are shaking so hard I can barely type this because I realize my family does not just hate me. They are actively hunting me. How do you fight for your freedom when your own blood relatives have turned the whole world against you? Please, I am terrified and I have nowhere to run. What would you do? The girl in the mirror looked like she was holding her breath, waiting for the ceiling to collapse. That girl was me, Kate Miller, 25 years old, a freelance graphic designer currently scraping by in a drafty, one-bedroom apartment in New Haven, Connecticut. I had a checking account that hovered constantly in the double digits, a graveyard of antidepressants in my medicine cabinet that I had not touched in 6 months, and a family tree that had been pruned down to a single, rotting branch. I adjusted the strap of my silk bridesmaid dress, a shade of blush pink that Aunt Brenda swore was elegant but actually made me look like anemic lunch meat. You can do this, Kate, I whispered to my reflection. Just 5 more hours. Smile. Do not be the disaster they expect you to be. My history was not exactly spotless. There was the DUI when I was 21. Right after the funeral, there were the months of therapy where I questioned my own sanity. But I had been clean, sober, and stable for 2 years. I was trying. God, I was trying so hard. I stepped out of the guest cottage and into the humidity of a Connecticut summer afternoon. The venue was the rolling backyard of Aunt Brenda's estate in Greenwich. It was the kind of wealth that whispered rather than shouted. Manicured hedges, white tents that rippled in the breeze, and a string quartet playing Vivaldi near the koi pond. It was a perfect picture, a lie painted in pastels. Kate, there you are. The voice was high-pitched, piercing through the humid air like a siren. Sarah, my cousin, and today's blushing bride, came storming across the grass. She looked beautiful, I had to admit, in a Vera Wang gown that cost more than my entire college tuition. But the scowl on her face ruined the illusion. Where have you been? Sarahisit, grabbing my arm, her nails dug into my skin. Hidden from the guests by the bouquet of white roses she shoved into my chest. Mike has been looking for you for the photos. You are ruining the schedule. I was just fixing my hair. Sarah, I am here now, I said, keeping my voice level. Deep breaths. Do not engage. Mike, the groom, sauntered over. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit a little too tightly around the midsection. His face flushed from what I assumed was pre-wedding nerves, or pre-wedding whiskey. Mike was a financial consultant, which in our family meant he was unemployed with a gambling problem that everyone politely ignored. Easy, babe, Mike said, draping an arm around Sarah. He looked at me with a smirk that did not reach his eyes. Kate is just Soyudzingholing. Tuhash is greater than taking her time. You know how she gets when she is overwhelmed. There it was. The first dig. The implication that I was fragile. that I was broken. I am fine. Mike, I said, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack my face. We gathered under the floral archway for the family photos. This was the moment I dreaded most. Aunt Brenda took center stage. She was a small woman with hair dyed a fierce, unnatural blonde and a cross necklace resting prominently on her chest. To the outside world, Brenda was a saint, the woman who took in her orphaned niece when my parents' car went off that bridge 2 years ago. To me, she was a shark in a Chanel suit, chin up. Kate, Aunt Brenda murmured as she squeezed in next to me for the photo. She smelled of expensive lavender soap and judgment. Try not to look so sullen. We paid a fortune for this photographer. Do not let your Soyuting Haling. 2. Moods spoil Sarah's big day. Moods? That was their code word for my depression. For my grief, I am smiling. Aunt Brenda, I said through gritted teeth. Just like your mother. She sighed, loud enough for the photographer to hear. Always so dramatic. God rest her troubled soul. My stomach churned. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them that my mother was not troubled. She was exhausted from dealing with them. But I did not. I held my breath. The camera shutter clicked, capturing my forced compliance forever. Click, click, click. The reception began 1 hour later under the massive white tent. The air was thick with the smell of roasted lamb and expensive perfume. I sat at the head table, feeling the eyes of our extended relatives boring into me. I could hear their whispers, masked by the clinking of silverware. Is she drinking? I heard she lost her job again. Brenda is a saint for dealing with her. After what happened with her parents, Saoying Haling, 2 hash is greater than the apple, does not fall far from the tree. I gripped the tablecloth under the table, my knuckles turning white. The isolation was suffocating. I was surrounded by 100 people, yet I was completely alone. I was the charity case, the black sheep, the ticking time bomb they were all watching. Waiting for the explosion? You look like you need this. I looked up. Aunt Brenda was standing over me. In her hand, she held a crystal goblet filled with dark red wine. I am sticking to water. Thanks, I said, covering my glass. Oh, nonsense, Brenda said, her voice dripping with that sickeningly sweet concern. She placed the glass firmly in front of me. It is a special vintage. Mike's father brought it up from the cellar. Just one toast. Kate. For family? Unless Soyuting Haling. 2 hashes greater than you do not think you can handle 1 glass? She raised an eyebrow. It was a challenge. If I refused, I was the unstable alcoholic who could not trust herself. If I drank, I was playing by their rules. Around us, the guests were raising their glasses for the speeches. The pressure in the room felt physical, like a heavy wool blanket draped over my shoulders. Fine, I said. For family, I picked up the glass. The wine was dark, almost black in the dim evening light. I took a sip. It was rich, heavy, with a strange, metallic aftertaste that lingered on my tongue. That is a good girl. Brenda smiled. It was a cold smile, a smile that did not reach her eyes. She patted my shoulder, a little too hard, and walked back to her seat next to the bride. I finished the glass during the best man's speech. 10 minutes later, the world tilted. It started with a hum in my ears, low and vibrating, like a swarm of bees. Then came the heat, a sudden, violent flush that started in my chest and raced up my neck. My heart, which had been beating a steady rhythm of anxiety, suddenly began to hammer against my ribs like a trapped bird. Thump, 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 thump. I blinked, trying to clear my vision. The white tablecloths seemed to be glowing, the light becoming harsh and abrasive. What is happening? I looked across the table at Sarah. For a second, just a split second, her face seemed to melt, her eyes elongated, her mouth stretching into a grotesque, impossible grin. I gasped, pushing my chair back. The scraping sound echoed in my head like a gunshot. "Kate?" Mike's voice sounded distorted, like he was speaking underwater. "You okay?" I tried to stand up, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. The room was spinning. The faces of the guests were blurring into smears of color. Panic, cold and sharp, sliced through me. This was not anxiety. This was not a panic attack. I had been drugged. Howling. 2# is greater than I need to leave. I stammered, my tongue feeling thick and numb. "Sit down." "Kate." Aunt Brenda's voice cut through the noise. It was not underwater. It was crystal clear. "Do not make a scene." But it was too late. The walls of the tent were closing in on me. The air was running out. I lunged away from the table, desperate for oxygen, desperate to escape the eyes that were suddenly everywhere, judging, watching, waiting for the monster to reveal itself. I did not know it then, as I stumbled toward the dance floor. But my life as I knew it was over. The nightmare had not just begun. It had been carefully orchestrated, and I had just walked right into the trap. The music stopped being music first. The delicate strings of the quartet did not fade away. Instead, they warped, the violins stretched and groaned, twisting into a high-pitched screech that sounded like metal grinding against bone. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the sound was not coming from outside. It was inside my skull, drilling directly into my brain. I stumbled backward, my heels catching on the thick grass. The world was pulsing. Every heartbeat sent a shockwave of neon color rippling through my vision. Howling. Dve, Kate. I looked up. Sarah was standing in front of me. But it was not Sarah. Her flawless skin was melting, dripping off her cheekbones like hot wax. Her eyes, usually a sharp, icy blue, had widened into black, bottomless pits that threatened to swallow me whole. Her mouth opened, and instead of concern, I heard a low, demonic growl. "You ruin everything." The monster whispered, "Get away from me." I screamed. The sound tore through my throat. Raw and terrified, I scrambled away from her, my limbs flailing without coordination. My center of gravity was gone. I felt like I was walking on the deck of a ship in a hurricane. I needed to find a weapon. I needed to defend myself against the demons surrounding me. I spun around and saw a tower of light. It was the champagne fountain. Hundreds of crystal glasses stacked in a perfect pyramid, shimmering under the tent lights. In my hallucination, the tower was falling toward me. I threw my hands up to stop it. Ling. 2# is greater than crash. The sound was apocalyptic. The shattering of glass was deafening, sharp, and violent. I felt shards slice into my arms, but I did not feel pain. I felt wetness, cold, sticky liquid drenched me instantly. I was on the floor. I looked up through the haze. Sarah was standing over me. The wine I had knocked over, red wine, specially requested for the head table, was soaking into the bottom of her $10,000 Vera Wang gown. The stain bloomed rapidly, creeping up the white fabric like fresh arterial blood. My dress, Sarah shrieked. The demon voice was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated rage. Oh my God. Look what you did. People were running. Aunt Brenda was there, her face a mask of horrified delight. Mike was grabbing my shoulders, his grip bruising. She is crazy, someone yelled. Call 911. I tried to explain. I tried to tell them about the melting face and the screeching violins, but all that came out of my mouth were incoherent sobs. My heart was beating so fast I thought it would explode. Darkness crept in from the edges of my vision, narrowing the world down to a single pinpoint of light, until finally, there was nothing. When I opened my eyes, the world was white, blindingly, aggressively white. The smell of lavender and expensive perfume was gone, replaced by the stinging scent of antiseptic and bleach. I tried to raise my hand to shield my eyes, but I could not move. My wrist was restrained to the metal rail of the bed. Panic flared in my chest again, but it was duller now, weighed down by exhaustion. I tugged at the leather strap. I would not do that if I were you. Miss Miller. I turned my head. A doctor in a white coat was standing at the foot of the bed, reading a clipboard. He looked bored. Where am I? I croaked. My throat felt like sandpaper. St. Mary's Hospital, the doctor said without looking up. You were brought in 3 hours ago. You were sedated for your own safety and the safety of my staff. I was drugged, I said. The words felt heavy on my tongue. At the wedding, someone put something in my drink. The doctor finally looked at me. His expression was not sympathetic. It was the look one gives to a misbehaving child. We ran a toxicology screen on your blood. Kate, it came back clean for narcotics. High levels of cortisol and adrenaline. Yes, but no drugs. That is impossible. I insisted, my voice rising. I saw things, the faces, Saud Singh Holing, 2 hashes greater than they were melting. The sounds were distorted. That was not just stress. The mind is a powerful thing, he said, flipping a page on his chart. Given your history of depression and previous alcohol abuse, coupled with the high-stress environment of a family wedding, our diagnosis is an acute panic attack with dissociative features, essentially a psychotic break induced by stress. I am not crazy, I whispered, but the conviction was leaking out of me. Was I? The door to my room flew open with a bang. She is awake? Good. Sarah marched into the room, still wearing her wedding dress. The bottom half was stained a deep, ugly purple from the wine. It looked ruined. Mike trailed behind her, looking like a bodyguard who had not slept. Family only. Please, the doctor started to say, but Mike silenced him with a glare. The doctor sighed and walked out, closing the door behind him. I shrank back against the pillows. Sarah, Sayu Jing Hao Ling, Jing Hao Dayu. Shut up. Sarah snapped. Her eyes were red and puffy, her makeup smeared. She looked less like a bride and more like a vengeful spirit. Do not give me your apologies. I do not want your sorry. She reached into the bodice of her dress and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She slapped it onto the tray table that hovered over my bed. Read it, she commanded. I struggled to focus my eyes. It was a handwritten list, scrawled on the back of a wedding itinerary. Custom Varawang gown, $10,000. Venue cleaning fee, $5,000. Photography cancellation, $3,000. Catering loss, $12,000. Emotional distress and pain, $20,000. At the bottom, a number was circled 3 times in thick black ink. Total, $50,000. What is this? I asked, staring at the number. It looked like a phone number, not a debt. That is what you cost us today, Mike said, stepping forward. His voice was low and menacing. You destroyed the reception. People left early. The venue is charging us for the carpet stains. You ruined the happiest day of Sarah's life. I did not mean to, I said, tears pricking my eyes. I got sick. I think Aunt Brenda gave me. Sayu Jinghao Ling. Jinghao Dayu. Do not you dare bring my mother into this? Sarah screamed, her voice cracking. She tried to help you. She gave you a glass of wine to calm your nerves because you were shaking like a leaf. And this is how you repay her? By destroying everything? You have two choices. Kate, Mike said, crossing his arms. You pay us this money, every single cent, or we sue you. We will take you to civil court for destruction of property and emotional damages. And we will make sure the video of you screaming like a banshee and attacking the wedding cake goes viral on every platform in America. I do not have $50,000. I whispered, you know I do not. I have savings. But Sayu Jinghao Ling, Jinghao Dayu, then you better figure it out. Sarahi said. She leaned in close, her breath smelling of stale champagne. Sell your car, sell your apartment. I do not care. You owe me. They turned and walked out, leaving the invoice sitting there like a death sentence. I stared at the paper. $50,000. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window of the hospital room. My hair was matted, my eyes wild and bloodshot. I looked unhinged. I looked exactly like the person they said I was. Maybe they are right. A voice inside my head whispered, maybe the wine was fine. Maybe the poison is not in the glass. Maybe the poison is you. My apartment was exactly as I had left it, but it felt like walking into a stranger's house. The air was stale, smelling faintly of old coffee and dust. I locked the door behind me and leaned against the cold wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. The silence should have been comforting, but after the chaos of the hospital and the screaming accusations, the quiet felt heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. I stayed there for a long time, staring at the scuff marks on my laminate flooring. I was 25 years old, and I had effectively ceased to exist as a functioning member of society. I was no longer Kate Miller, graphic designer. I was Kate Miller, the unstable cousin who destroyed a $50,000 wedding. $50,000. The number echoed in my head, bouncing around like a trapped bird. I did not have $50,000. I did not even have $5,000. My savings account was a joke, depleted by the therapy sessions insurance refused to cover, and the high rent of living in a city I could barely afford. I crawled toward the living room, my limbs feeling heavy, like I was moving through molasses. On the floor, where the mail slot had deposited the day's delivery, lay a thick cream-colored envelope. It was heavy, expensive stock. The return address was embossed in gold leaf. Halloway and Partners, attorneys at law. Brenda did not waste time. My hands shook as I tore it open. The paper inside was crisp and authoritative. Dear Miss Miller, we represent Mr. Michael Vance and Mistress Sarah Vance regarding the incident on Saturday, June 15th. Enclosed is a formal demand for restitution regarding property damage and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You have 7 days to remit the initial payment of $10,000, with the remaining balance to be structured over a 24-month period. Failure to comply will result in immediate litigation. 7 days. They wanted $10,000 in 7 days. I dropped the letter as if it were burning my fingers. A laugh bubbled up in my throat, but it was not a happy sound. It was dry and jagged. They were insane. They had to know I could not pay this. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then it buzzed again and again. A steady rhythm of notifications that made my stomach turn. I had turned it off at the hospital, but I must have bumped the power button when I threw my bag down. I picked it up. The screen was lit up with notifications from Facebook and Instagram. I had been tagged in a post, then 10 posts, then 50. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew I should put it down. I knew looking would only hurt, but the masochistic part of my brain, the part that needed to know just how bad the damage was, forced me to unlock the screen. It was Sarah, of course. It was Sarah. She had posted a video. The caption read, "Heartbroken. I tried to help my cousin, and this is how she repaid me. Please pray for our family during this difficult time. Wedding disaster mental health awareness ruined." The hashtag mental health awareness made me want to vomit. I pressed play. The video was shaky, likely filmed by one of the guests on a smartphone. In the footage, I looked deranged. My hair was wild, sticking up in sweaty clumps. My eyes were wide and unfocused, darting around at things that were not there. In the video, I was not just stumbling, I was screaming, "Get them off me! Their faces! Look at their faces!" The audio was crisp. I sounded terrified, but to an outsider, I just sounded drunk and crazy. Then came the crash. The camera jerked as I plowed into the champagne tower. The collective gasp of the crowd was audible, followed by the sight of Sarah's dress turning purple. I watched myself fall. I watched Mike grab me. I watched Aunt Brenda rush in, looking like the picture of a concerned mother hen. I scrolled down to the comments. Wow, what a psycho. Who invites a junkie to a wedding? That poor bride. I would sue her for everything she has. She looks like she is on bath salts. Lock her up. Hundreds of strangers. People I had never met. People who did not know that I had only drunk 1 glass of wine. People who did not know that 10 minutes before that video was taken, I was sitting quietly, holding my breath, trying to be invisible. They were rewriting my history to the world. I was no longer the victim. I was the villain. I threw the phone across the room. It hit the couch cushions with a soft thud. I paced the small length of my apartment. My chest felt tight. Maybe they were right. The thought whispered insidiously in the back of my mind. Maybe I really had snapped. The doctor said my toxicology report was clean. If there were no drugs, then the only explanation was that my brain had broken. I stopped pacing, saluting Pauline. "Due cancelletto, è maggiore di no." I said it aloud to the empty room. No, I remembered the taste of the wine. Metallic, bitter, not like the Pinot Noir I usually drank. I remembered Aunt Brenda's eyes when she handed me the glass. They had not been warm. They had been predatory. She had been waiting. I needed proof. But how could I prove anything when the medical evidence said I was clean? I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop. I needed to see the wedding photos. Not the ones Sarah posted to shame me, but the others. The ones from earlier in the day. I needed to see myself before the fall. I needed to see if I looked drunk, or if I looked like a girl who was about to be framed. I navigated to Sarah's Facebook page. She had already created an album titled Our Almost Perfect Day. I clicked through them. There was Sarah getting her makeup done, Sarah and Mike posing by the altar, Aunt Brenda crying fake tears with a handkerchief. Then I saw the group photos, The ones we took before the reception. I clicked on the one of us under the floral arch. I zoomed in on my face. I looked pale. Yes, uncomfortable. Absolutely. But my eyes were clear. My posture was straight. I did not look like someone on the verge of a psychotic break. I clicked next. Sarah cutting the cake. 小玉静好令. 2 hash is greater than weight. I frowned. The timeline was wrong. The cake cutting happened before the speeches? No, that could not be right. I tried to remember the schedule. The itinerary said cake cutting was last. But in this photo, the light was golden. The golden hour before sunset. The speeches happened after dark. Inside the tent, they must have done a staged cake cutting for the photographer early in the evening, before the guests sat down. That was common. I looked at the photo again. Sarah was laughing, holding the knife with Mike's hand over hers. Aunt Brenda was in the background, clapping. Something about Sarah's neck caught the light. I leaned closer to the screen. My heart did a strange, slow somersault in my chest. Sarah was wearing a necklace. It was a delicate piece, a gold chain with a pendant that hung right in the hollow of her throat. I zoomed in until the image began to pixelate. It was a sapphire, a deep, midnight blue stone surrounded by a halo of tiny, old-fashioned diamonds. The setting was unique, a flower shape with one missing diamond on the bottom right petal. The air left my lungs in a rush. I knew that necklace. I knew that missing diamond. I closed my eyes, and suddenly I was back in the hospital room 2 years ago. The smell of rain and blood. My mother lying on the gurney, her face covered by a sheet. The police officer handing me a plastic bag with her personal effects. Her watch, her wedding ring. Where's the necklace? I had asked. She never took it off. It was her grandmother's. Aunt Brenda had been there, standing right behind me. She had placed a hand on my shoulder. It must have been lost in the crash. Sweetie, Brenda had said. Her voice had been so soothing. The car was a wreck. Things get thrown around. It is just a thing. Kate, you have your memories. I had believed her. Why would not I? Who would steal jewelry from their dead sister's body? I opened my eyes and looked at the screen again. There it was. 2 years later, resting casually around the neck of my cousin on her wedding day. My hands started to tremble, but this time, it was not from fear. It was from a cold, hard realization. Brenda had lied. She had been at the scene of the accident before the ambulance arrived. I knew she lived close to the bridge where my parents crashed, but she claimed she only arrived after the police called her. If she stole the necklace, she was there earlier. She was there when my parents were helpless, and if she could lie about that, 小玉静好令. 2 hash is greater than if she could look me in the eye for 2 years and tell me the necklace was gone while it sat in her jewelry box. 小玉静好令. 2 hash is greater than, what else was she capable of? I looked at the invoice again. $50,000. They did not just want money. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted to bury me under debt and shame so deep that I would never be able to ask questions. They wanted to discredit me so that if I ever remembered anything about the accident or the money my parents left behind, no one would believe the crazy cousin. The gaslighting cleared like smoke in a strong wind. I was not crazy. I was not unstable. I was a victim of a crime. I reached for my phone. I did not throw it this time. I opened the voice recorder app. My name is Kate Miller, I said, my voice steady for the first time in 24 hours. Today is June 16th. I am not crazy. My aunt and cousin drugged me to extort money and hide a theft, and I am going to prove it. I looked at the picture of the sapphire necklace one last time. It was not just a piece of jewelry anymore. It was the key to their undoing. I was not going to pay them. I was going to make them pay. The knocking started at 3 in the afternoon. It was not the aggressive pounding of a landlord looking for rent, nor was it the polite tap of a neighbor. It was a rhythmic, persistent rap that sounded like a woodpecker drilling into the wood of my front door. I sat on my couch, knees pulled up to my chest, and watched the door handle. I did not move. I barely breathed. I had spent the last 18 hours dissecting the photo of the sapphire necklace, oscillating between white-hot rage and paralyzing fear. "Kate, I know you are in there." The doorman let me up. The voice was muffled, but unmistakably, Aunt Brenda. My stomach twisted. Part of me wanted to bolt the door and scream at her to go away. But another part of me, the part that had been trained since childhood to respect my elders, to be polite, to never make a scene, felt the automatic urge to obey. I stood up, my legs stiff. I walked to the door and unlocked the deadbolt. Aunt Brenda stood in the hallway. She was not wearing her usual power suit. Instead, she wore a soft beige cardigan and slacks, her hair pulled back in a loose, approachable bun. She held a Tupperware container in her hands. "Oh, Catherine," she sighed, her eyes sweeping over my disheveled appearance. "You look absolutely wasted away." She pushed past me before I could invite her in. The scent of her lavender perfume filled my small living room, masking the smell of stale air. She marched to my kitchenette and placed the container on the counter. "I brought you chicken soup," she said, removing the lid. Steam curled up, smelling of rosemary and home. "I know you forget to eat when you get like this, just like your mother used to." I flinched. She did it so effortlessly. In one sentence, she offered care and twisted the knife about my mother's mental state. "What do you want, Aunt Brenda?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. I did not close the door completely. I wanted an escape route. Brenda turned around, her face arranging itself into a mask of deep, pained concern. She walked over to the couch and sat down, patting the cushion beside her. "Come sit, Kate. We need to talk about the future." I stayed where I was. "I am comfortable standing," she said, a sound of long, suffering patience. "Fine. Have it your way. I came here because Sarah is out for blood." "Kate, she is talking to lawyers. She wants to garnish your wages. She wants to put a lien on this apartment." "I know," I said. "She sent me the bill, $50,000. Brenda murmured, shaking her head. "It is a lot of money. Money you do not have. And with your record, Saoijing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than well. Let us just be honest. If this goes to court, the judge is going to look at your history of alcohol abuse, your recent stay in the psych ward, and they are going to crush you." "I was not in a psych ward," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I was in the emergency room for 3 hours. Semantics." Brenda waved her hand dismissively. "The point is, you are unwell. We all saw it at the wedding. That was not normal behavior. Kate, that was a breakdown. A psychotic break." She reached into her oversized purse and pulled out a thick blue folder. "I have been up all night praying on this," she said softly. "I cannot let my sister's daughter go to jail or end up on the street. I promised your mother I would look after you." She placed the folder on the coffee table. "What is that?" I asked. "It is a solution," she said. "Sarah is willing to drop the lawsuit. She will forgive the debt completely. No, $50,000. No public humiliation. No court dates. My heart skipped a beat. And what do I have to do? You just need to let me take care of you, Brenda said. She opened the folder. This is a document granting me limited conservatorship over your affairs, just for a year or two, until you get back on your feet. I stared at the papers. The words swam before my eyes. Power of attorney, medical proxy, asset management. You want control of my life? I asked. I want to protect you from yourself. She corrected. You obviously cannot handle the stress of the real world right now. Look at this place. Kate, look at you. You are spiraling. If you sign this, I can manage your parents' inheritance trust so you do not squander it. I can handle your bills. I can get you into a nice, private treatment facility where you can rest. For a second, just a split second, I was tempted. I was so tired. My head hurt. The idea of surrendering, of letting someone else fix the mess, was incredibly seductive. I wanted to curl up and sleep. I wanted the noise to stop. Aunt Brenda looked so safe, sitting there in her beige cardigan, offering me soup and salvation. Just sign it. A weak voice in my head whispered, make it stop. I took a step toward the table. I reached out a hand. Then, the image flashed in my mind. The sapphire necklace. The midnight blue stone resting on Sarah's throat. The missing diamond. If Brenda truly cared about family, she would not have stolen the one thing my mother wore every day. If Brenda was a saint, she would not have lied to a grieving 23-year-old about her dead mother's jewelry. This was not salvation. This was a cage. She did not want to help me. She wanted to silence me. She wanted legal control over my money and my medical decisions, so that if I ever figured out the truth about the theft, she could legally declare me insane and lock me away. I pulled my hand back as if the paper were red hot. No, I said. The silence that followed was heavy and cold. Brenda blinked. Excuse me? I said no. I repeated, my voice stronger this time. I am not signing that. I do not need a conservator. I need a lawyer. Brenda's expression did not change immediately. It shifted slowly, like a landscape freezing over. The warmth evaporated from her eyes, replaced by a flat, dead stare. The corner of her mouth twitched. You are making a mistake, she said. Her voice was no longer soft. It was the voice she used when she scolded the maids. You are not thinking clearly. I am thinking clearer than I have in years. I said, take your papers and get out of my apartment. Brenda stood up. She did not look like a kindly aunt anymore. She loomed in my small living room, a dark shape blocking the light. She picked up the folder and slid it back into her bag with a sharp zip. You are an ungrateful, sick little girl, she spat. I tried to do this the easy way. I tried to be gentle. She walked to the door, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. She paused with her hand on the knob and looked back at me. There was no pity in her face now, only malice. You think you can fight us? She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You are nobody. Kate, you are a drunk with a history of mental instability. I am a pillar of this community. Sarah is a victim. Who do you think the judge will believe? Who do you think the world will believe? I guess we will find out, I said, though my knees were shaking. When I am done with you, Brenda hissed, leaning in. You will be begging to go to that treatment center. You will be begging for a padded room just to escape what is coming. She slammed the door behind her. The sound rattled the pictures on my walls. I stood there, trembling, the scent of lavender still hanging in the air like a poison gas. I looked at the bowl of chicken soup on the counter. It looked innocent. It looked nourishing. I walked over to it, picked up the bowl, and poured it down the sink. As the broth swirled away, I noticed a small, white clump at the bottom that had not quite dissolved. Maybe it was flour, maybe it was seasoning, or maybe it was the same thing they put in my wine. I turned on the faucet and washed it away, scrubbing the bowl until my hands were red. I had drawn a line in the sand. I had refused to be their victim. But as the sun went down and the shadows lengthened across my floor, I realized Brenda was right about one thing. The easy way was over. Now, the war had begun. The hardest part of lying was not the words, it was the eyes. I stood on the front porch of Aunt Brenda's massive colonial estate, clutching my purse with both hands to hide the tremor in my fingers. I had called her 1 hour ago. I had cried on the phone. I had told her that the pressure was too much, that the debt collectors were calling, and that I was ready to talk about the conservatorship. It was the best acting performance of my life. The heavy oak door swung open. Aunt Brenda stood there, a triumphant smirk plastered across her face. She was wearing a crisp white linen suit, looking every bit the benevolent matriarch. I knew you would come to your senses, Catherine, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Come in. I have the papers on the dining table. We can get this sorted out and get you the help you need. I walked into the foyer. The house smelled of lemon polish and old money. It was quiet, oppressively so. Where are Sarah and Mike? I asked, keeping my voice small and defeated. Oh, they are out meeting with their lawyer, Brenda said, waving a hand dismissively, trying to salvage what is left of their reputation after your little stunt. But do not worry. Once you sign, I will handle them. Her phone rang, a shrill, demanding sound that echoed off the marble floors. Brenda looked at the screen and gasped. Oh, it is the chairwoman of the club. I have been trying to get a hold of her all week. Excuse me for just a moment. Dear, make yourself comfortable in the living room. She bustled away toward the sunroom, her voice immediately switching to a syrupy, ingratiating tone as she answered the call. This was it. I waited until she was around the corner. Then, I took off my shoes so I could move silently. I did not go to the living room. I sprinted up the grand staircase, skipping every other step, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached the second-floor landing and headed straight for the master suite Sarah used when she stayed here. The door was unlocked. I slipped inside and closed it softly behind me. The room was a disaster. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Expensive designer bags tossed on the floor. Empty champagne bottles lining the dresser. It was a stark contrast to the pristine order of the rest of the house. This was the real Sarah. Chaotic, spoiled, messy. I went straight to the bedside table. Nothing. I checked the dresser drawers. Lingerie, makeup, nothing. Think. Kate, where does Mike hide his shame? I dropped to my knees and lifted the edge of the mattress. There, sandwiched between the box spring and the mattress, was a thick manila envelope. I pulled it out and spilled the contents onto the floor. My breath hitched. It was not just one debt. It was dozens. Notices from 3 different casinos in Atlantic City. Final warnings from credit card companies. And terrifyingly, a handwritten IOU note to a name I did not recognize for $20,000 with the words "pay or else" underlined in red. Mike was not just broke. He was drowning. He was in danger. I shuffled through the papers, my hands shaking. At the bottom of the pile was a document with the logo of a major insurance company. I picked it up. It was a life insurance policy. The name of the insured was Catherine Miller. The beneficiary was Brenda Vance. The policy had been taken out 6 months ago. Aunt Brenda had forged my signature. I felt the blood drain from my face. They did not just want my inheritance. If I died, perhaps from a tragic suicide due to my instability, they would get a payout of $500,000. I was worth more to them dead than alive. Suddenly, I heard the heavy thud of the front door slamming downstairs. "Mom, we are home." It was Sarah's voice. They were back early. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded my veins. I shoved the papers back into the envelope and jammed it under the mattress. I looked for a place to hide. The closet? No. They might change clothes. The bathroom? No escape. I dropped to the floor and rolled under the massive king-sized bed. The dust bunnies tickled my nose. I pressed my hand over my mouth, praying to a God I had not spoken to in years. Please, please do not let me sneeze. The bedroom door opened. 2 pairs of feet walked in, Sarah's expensive heels and Mike's scuffed loafers. "I am telling you, she is going to sign," Sarah said. Her voice was muffled but clear. She sounded exhausted and angry. "Mom said Kate called crying. She is broken." "Mike, we won. We better hope so." Mike's voice was rough, because if we do not get access to her trust fund by Friday, those guys in Jersey are going to break my legs. I watched their shoes move around the room. Sarah kicked off her heels. They landed inches from my face. I squeezed my eyes shut. "You should not have used that much stuff." "Mike," Sarah said. She went totally batshit. "If the toxicology comes back dirty, we are screwed." My eyes snapped open. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. I needed to record this. My fingers felt like sausages as I swiped the screen and hit the red button on the voice memo app. "Relax," Mike said. "Mom said the stuff leaves the system in 12 hours. It is untraceable by now. Besides, everyone saw her freak out. Who are they going to believe? The crazy girl with the DUI record, or the grieving family? I still hate that she ruined my dress." Sarah whined. "Do you think we can really get 50,000 out of her?" "We will get everything," Mike said. He sat down on the bed right above me. The springs creaked ominously, pressing down toward my spine. "Once Brenda gets conservatorship, we liquidate her assets, sell her car, empty her savings. To sell that dump of an apartment, we pay off the sharks, and we are free." "And then what?" Sarah asked. "What do we do with her?" "We put her in a state facility," Mike said coldly. "Somewhere cheap. Let her rot. She is useless to us after we get the money." Tears streamed down my face. Hot and silent, I watched the waveform on my phone's screen ripple with their voices. I had it. I had the confession. I had the motive. "Come on," Sarah said. "Let us go get a drink downstairs. I need a vodka tonic before I have to deal with her face." "After you," Mike said. The weight lifted off the bed. I watched their feet retreat toward the door. "Did you hear something?" Mike stopped. My heart stopped beating. I held my breath until my lungs burned. "Hear what?" Sarah asked from the hallway. Thought I heard a phone vibrate. Mike said. He took a step back toward the bed. I could see the toe of his shoe. He was going to look down. He was going to see me. "You are paranoid," Sarah called out. "Come on." "Mike, Mom is probably making her sign right now." Mike hesitated. Then he turned around. "Yeah, you are right." The door clicked shut. I lay there for a full minute, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. I was not just a victim anymore. I was a witness, and I held the weapon that would destroy them. I crawled out from under the bed, covered in dust. I did not bother being quiet anymore. I grabbed my shoes and ran. I did not go down the main stairs. I went out the window, climbing onto the trellis covered in ivy that led down to the garden. It was reckless. It was dangerous. But I would rather break a leg than spend another second in that house. I hit the ground running. I ran through the manicured hedges, past the koi pond, and out the back gate. I did not stop running until I was 3 blocks away. Gasping for air, my phone clutched in my hand like a grenade with the pin pulled out. I was not going to hide anymore. I was going to war. The engine of my Honda Civic whined as I pushed it onto the interstate, merging into the flow of traffic with reckless speed. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles had turned the color of bone. Beside me, on the passenger seat, my phone sat like a loaded weapon. I had them. I replayed the recording in my mind, over and over. Mike's voice, arrogant and careless, admitting to the drugs. Sarah's voice, whining about the money. It was perfect. It was the silver bullet that would not only kill the lawsuit but send them both to prison. For the first time in days, I felt a surge of triumph. The fear that had been living in my chest, a cold and heavy stone, began to crack. I was going to drive straight to the police station. I was going to play this audio for the first detective I saw. I was going to watch the color drain from Aunt Brenda's face as they led her away in handcuffs. I glanced at the fuel gauge. The needle was hovering dangerously close to the empty line. I had to stop. I pulled into a gas station off the highway, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. I inserted my debit card into the reader. Processing. I tapped my foot against the asphalt, adrenaline still coursing through my veins. I needed coffee. I needed to splash cold water on my face. Saoyudzing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than declined. I frowned. That was impossible. I had just been paid for a freelance logo design 2 days ago. There should be at least $2,000 in that account. I tried again. Declined. Please see cashier. A knot of unease began to tie itself in my stomach. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking application. My thumb hovered over the icon. Trembling slightly, the screen loaded. My breath caught in my throat. Available balance, $0.00. Status, frozen. Court order. I stared at the screen, unable to comprehend the words. Frozen? Court order? My phone pinged with an email notification. It was from a secure document delivery service. The subject line read, Service of Process, Matter of the Emergency Conservatorship of Catherine Miller. I opened the document, standing there under the harsh gas station lights, while the world around me began to slow down. It was a court order, signed by a judge less than 4 hours ago. It was an ex parte order, meaning it had been granted without me being present to defend myself. Petitioner, Brenda Vance. Respondent, Catherine Miller. Reasoning, respondent exhibits severe psychotic behavior, self-harm risks, and substance abuse issues. Immediate control of financial and medical decisions is granted to the petitioner to ensure the safety of the respondent. Brenda had not just threatened me, she had done it while I was hiding under her bed, while I was running through her garden. Her lawyers were already standing in front of a judge, presenting the video of me screaming at the wedding, presenting my old medical records, painting a picture of a girl who had lost her mind, and the judge had believed them. I was no longer a person. In the eyes of the law, I was a child. I was incompetent. I had no right to my money. I had no right to hire a lawyer. I effectively had no rights at all. I looked at the recording on my phone. Did it even matter now? If I went to the police, would they listen to me? Or would they look up my name in the system, see the court order, and call my legal guardian? If they called Brenda, she would come down. She would say I was having another episode. She would say the recording was faked, or manipulated, or the ramblings of a paranoid mind. And she would take my phone. She would delete the evidence, and then she would lock me away. I sank down onto the curb next to the gas pump. I had no gas. I had no money. I had no legal standing. I was 25 years old, and I had just been erased. The despair that washed over me was not sharp or sudden. It was a dark, rising tide. It felt heavy and suffocating. I thought about my parents. I thought about how hard I had worked to build a life after they died. The late nights working on design projects. The therapy sessions where I learned to breathe through the grief. It was all gone. Brenda had taken it with a single signature. I put my head in my hands and sobbed. I cried for the injustice of it. I cried for the girl in the mirror who had tried so hard to be good. Hey, lady, you okay? I looked up. A truck driver was staring at me, a mixture of pity and annoyance on his face. I have no money, I whispered, my voice raw. He looked at my car, then back at me. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $20 bill. Here, he grunted, shoving it into my hand. Get some gas, go home. I looked at the money. It was charity. It was humiliating. Thank you. I choked out. I put $10 in the tank and used the rest to buy a bottle of water and a granola bar. I sat in my car and ate mechanically, forcing the food down my tight throat. I needed help, but who could help a person who did not legally exist? A name floated up from the recesses of my memory. Davis. Arthur Davis. He was my father's old friend. He was the lawyer who had handled my parents' estate before Brenda convinced me to switch to her family firm 2 years ago. I remembered him as a grumpy, chain-smoking man with a messy office, but he had looked at me with kindness at the funeral. He had been the only one who did not look at me like a tragedy. I checked the time. It was 6 in the evening. His office would be closed, but I had nowhere else to go. I could not go back to my apartment. Brenda probably had the keys by now. I drove into the city, to the older district where the brick buildings were covered in soot and the sidewalks were cracked. I found the small brass plaque next to a narrow door. Arthur Davis, attorney at law. The lights were still on upstairs. I climbed the creaky wooden stairs, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm. I knocked on the frosted glass door. We are closed, a gruff voice yelled from inside. Mr. Davis, I called out. It is Kate Miller. There was a silence. Then, the sound of heavy footsteps. The door opened. Arthur Davis looked older than I remembered. His hair was completely white now, and his face was lined with deep crevices like a road map of stress. He was wearing a rumpled suit and holding a half-eaten sandwich. Kate Miller, he said, squinting at me over his spectacles. My God, you look like you have been through a war. I am in one, I said. Can I come in? He stepped aside. His office smelled of stale tobacco and old paper. Files were stacked in precarious towers on every surface. It was chaotic, but it felt real. It felt safe. I sat in the leather chair opposite his desk. I did not waste time with pleasantries. I told him everything. I told him about the wedding, the wine, the hallucinations, The $50,000 bill, the sapphire necklace, the conversation I heard under the bed, and finally, the email I received at the gas station. I showed him the court order on my phone. Davis put on his glasses and read the document in silence. His expression grew darker with every line. He rubbed his temples, a sigh escaping his lips that sounded like a deflating tire. "This is bad, Kate," he said, his voice gravelly. Emergency conservatorships are designed to be nuclear weapons. They are used when the court believes imminent harm is about to occur. The burden of proof to get one is surprisingly low, but the burden to overturn it? Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, Jinghao Dayu, he trailed off, looking at me with sad eyes. To overturn it is nearly impossible, he finished, especially when the petitioner is a respected community member and the ward, that is you, has a documented history of mental health struggles. "But I have proof," I said, pulling out my phone. "I have the recording. They admitted to drugging me." "Play it," he said. I pressed play. The tinny sound of Mike and Sarah's voices filled the room. "Xiao Jinghaoling, 2# is greater than mom said the stuff leaves the system in 12 hours. Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, Jinghao Dayu, Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, 2# is greater than." We put her in a state facility. Let her rot. Xiaoyu Jinghaoling, Jinghao Dayu. When it finished, Davis leaned back in his chair. He did not look triumphant. He looked weary. "It is powerful," he admitted, "but it is inadmissible in many ways. You recorded them without consent in a private residence. Connecticut is a 2-party consent state for audio recordings." My heart sank. "So it is useless?" "Not useless," Davis corrected, "but complicated. And right now, Kate, you have a bigger problem. You have no legal capacity to hire me. You cannot sign a retainer. You cannot access your funds to pay court fees. Technically, if I represent you, Brenda could sue me for interfering with a ward of the state. So you are saying there is no hope?" I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You are saying they won." Davis looked at the picture of my father that sat on his bookshelf. It was an old photo, taken on a fishing trip years ago. He stared at it for a long time. Then, he looked back at me. His eyes were hard, sparking with a sudden, fierce anger. "I did not say there is no hope," Davis growled. "I said it is complicated. Your father was a good man. Kate, he hated bullies. And Brenda Vance is the biggest bully I have ever met." He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a fresh legal pad. He slammed it onto the desk, sending a cloud of dust into the air. "To hell with the retainer," he said. "I am taking the case, pro bono." I felt a tear slip down my cheek. "Thank you. Do not thank me yet," he warned, uncapping a pen. "We are in a very deep hole, kid. Brenda has the law on her side. She has the money. She has the public narrative. If we are going to beat her, we have to play dirty. We have to be smarter, and we have to move fast." He leaned forward, his face grim. "The hearing to make this conservatorship permanent is in 14 days. We have 2 weeks to prove you are sane, prove you were drugged, and prove Brenda is a thief. If we fail, she owns you forever." 14 days. It felt like a lifetime. It felt like a second. "What do we do first?" I asked. "First," Davis said, "we need to confirm the drugs." "You said the hospital blood test was clean?" Xiao Jinghaoling, Ketu. "Yes. Standard hospital screens only look for common street drugs and alcohol," Davis explained. "If they use something synthetic, or something rare like LSD. It would not show up unless they were looking for it, and now it is out of your blood. So the evidence is gone, I said, defeated. Not necessarily, Davis said. He looked at my hair. Hair grows about half an inch a month. Drugs enter the bloodstream and are deposited in the hair follicle. They stay there for months, years, even. He opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of scissors. We need a hair follicle test, he said. It costs money. Private labs only. I will pay for it. He stood up and walked around the desk. This is going to hurt, he said gently. I need a significant sample. From the root? I nodded. Do it. He grabbed a thick lock of hair from the back of my head. The metal of the scissors felt cold against my scalp. Sao Yu Ting Hao Ling. 2. Snip. The sound was loud in the quiet office. It sounded like a severance. I was cutting away the old Kate, the victim, the scared girl. We are going to fight them. Kate? Davis said, placing the hair into a plastic evidence bag. And we are going to make them regret the day they ever signed that paper. Outside the window, thunder rumbled in the distance. A storm was coming, but for the first time since the wedding, I was not afraid of the rain. I was ready to drown them in it. The Superior Court of Connecticut was a building designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were too high, the marble pillars were too wide, and the air was always 10 degrees too cold. I sat at the defendant's table, shivering in a navy blue blazer I had bought from a thrift store 2 days ago. It smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's perfume. My hands were folded in my lap. I squeezed my fingers together until the knuckles turned white, trying to ground myself. Do not look at them, I told myself. Look at the judge. Look at the flag. Just do not look at them. But I could feel them. To my right, at the plaintiff's table, sat the Holy Trinity of my destruction. Aunt Brenda was wearing a charcoal gray suit that screamed conservative elegance. She wore a single strand of pearls and a look of tragic stoicism. Beside her, Sarah dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Mike sat on the end, looking uncomfortable in a tie that was choking his thick neck. They looked like a portrait of a grieving American family. They looked like the victims. All rise, the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Judge Evelyn Moore swept into the room. She was a woman in her 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She sat down, arranged her robes, and peered over her reading glasses at the courtroom. We are here for the matter of the emergency conservatorship of Catherine Miller, Judge Moore said. Her voice was dry and devoid of emotion. Petitioner Brenda Vance versus respondent Catherine Miller. Let us proceed. Brenda's lawyer stood up. Mr. Sterling was a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a factory that produced sharks. He had a tan that was too orange and a smile that showed too many teeth. Your Honor, Sterling began, his voice smooth as oil. We are here today with heavy hearts. This is not a case about money or control. This is a case about love, a mother's love for her niece. I felt bile rise in my throat. I swallowed it down. My client, Mistress Vance, has watched her niece spiral downward for years. Sterling continued, pacing in front of the judge. Alcohol abuse, depression, erratic behavior. But what happened on June 15th was the breaking point. We have video evidence of Miss Miller in a state of complete psychosis, destroying property, attacking the bride, and screaming about hallucinations. He gestured to the large screen set up in the corner. May I play the footage? Your Honor? Proceed. The judge said. The video played. There I was, 10 feet tall in high definition, I watched myself screaming at the empty air. I watched myself clawing at my face. I watched the champagne tower crash down. The sound of my own terrified shrieks filled the courtroom. I closed my eyes. It was humiliating. It was a nightmare replaying on a loop. This is not a safe person, Sterling said softly as the video ended. This is a young woman who needs help. She needs a guardian. Mistress Vance is simply asking for the legal authority to provide that help. Sterling sat down. He looked confident. He looked like he had already won. Mr. Davis? The judge asked. Does the respondent have an opening statement? Arthur Davis stood up. He did not look like a shark. He looked like a tired bulldog. He buttoned his rumpled suit jacket and walked slowly to the center of the room. Your Honor, Davis said, his voice gravelly. The petitioner paints a very compelling picture. A story of a tragic, mentally ill girl and a saintly aunt. It is a good story, but it is a lie. A murmur went through the small gallery. Brenda stiffened in her seat. We are not here to debate my client's past, Davis said. We are here to talk about June 15th. We are here to talk about why a sober woman suddenly hallucinated demons. We are here to talk about poison. Objection. Sterling shot up. Speculation. There is no evidence of poisoning. The hospital toxicology report was clean. I will get to the evidence, Davis said calmly. If the court will indulge me. Overruled. The judge said, continue. Mr. Davis, I would like to call Brenda Vance to the stand, Davis said. Brenda stood up gracefully. She walked to the witness box, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. She sat down and looked at Davis with a mixture of pity and defiance. Mistress Vance, Davis began, leaning against the railing. You love your niece, do you not? I love her like my own daughter, Brenda said softly. I promised my late sister I would protect her, and that is why you served her with a $50,000 lawsuit while she was still recovering in the hospital? Davis asked. Brenda blinked. That was Sayu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than a misunderstanding. Sarah was emotional. We have since dropped that suit, only after you filed for conservatorship, Davis noted. Tell me, Mistress Vance, on the day of the wedding, did you give Kate anything to drink? I gave her a glass of wine, Brenda said. She looked anxious. I thought it would calm her nerves. Just wine? Of course, Brenda said, looking affronted. It was a vintage Cabernet. You did not put anything in it? Absolutely not. Brenda gasped. She looked at the judge. Your Honor, this is insulting. Mistress Vance, Davis said, his voice hardening. Are you aware of a drug called lysergic acid diethylamide, commonly known as LSD? Sayu Jinghao Ling. 2# is greater than I have heard of it. Brenda stammered. It is a street drug for junkies. I certainly do not keep it in my pantry. No, Davis said, but your son-in-law, Michael Vance, has a history of gambling debts, and in certain circles, debts are sometimes paid with favors or substances. Objection, Sterling yelled. This is a character assassination of a man who is not on trial. Sustained, the judge said. Move on, Mr. Davis. Davis nodded. He walked back to his table and picked up a thick envelope. Mistress Vance claims the hospital blood test was clean, Davis said, addressing the room. And she is right. Standard blood panels clear quickly. But hair never forgets. He pulled out a document from the envelope. Your Honor, I would like to submit into evidence Defense Exhibit A. This is the result of a hair follicle toxicology screening performed by LabCorp 3 days ago on Catherine Miller. Sterling looked nervous. He leaned over and whispered something frantically to Brenda. Brenda's face went pale. The results, Davis read aloud, show a massive spike of LSD ingestion occurring approximately 14 days ago. The concentration was high enough to cause severe hallucinations, paranoia, and temporary psychosis. The courtroom went silent. The silence was heavy, thick with shock. Kate Miller was not crazy, Davis said, dropping the paper onto the judge's bench. She was drugged, and the only person who handed her a drink that day was you, Mistress Vance. That proves nothing, Brenda shrieked, breaking her composure. She could have taken it herself. She is an addict. She took it to ruin the wedding. Why would she take a hallucinogen and then stand in the middle of a reception? Davis asked. Why would she sabotage herself? Because she is jealous, Brenda yelled, gripping the railing of the witness box. She has always been jealous of Sarah. She is a spiteful, broken little girl. Is she? Davis asked. He walked closer to her. Or is she just inconvenient? Is she inconvenient because she is the sole heir to her parents' estate? An estate you are currently trying to gain control over? I do not care about the money, Brenda insisted. I am wealthy in my own right. Are you? Davis asked. Or is your house mortgaged to the hilt? Are you covering your son-in-law's gambling debts to the tune of $200,000? Brenda's mouth opened and closed. She looked like a fish out of water. Your Honor, Sterling interrupted. Mr. Davis is throwing wild accusations without proof. I have proof of the debts, Davis said, holding up another stack of papers. But I have something better. He turned to me. Kate, give me the phone. I reached into my pocket and handed him my smartphone. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was the gamble. Your Honor, Davis said, I am aware that Connecticut is a two-party consent state for recording conversations. However, there is an exception to the wiretapping statute when the recording is made to obtain evidence of a violent felony. Poisoning someone is a violent felony. The judge narrowed her eyes. You are treading on thin ice, Mr. Davis. This better be good. It is, Davis said. He connected the phone to the courtroom's audio system. This recording was taken 7 days ago, Davis said. Inside the home of Brenda Vance, he pressed play. A hiss of static filled the room. Then, voices, clear and undeniable. So Yu Ting Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than Mom, said the stuff leaves the system in 12 hours. Xiao Yu Ting Hao Ling, Ting Hao Da Yu. Mike's voice boomed through the speakers. Brenda froze. Her hand went to her throat. Xiao Yu Ting Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than, it is untraceable by now. Xiao Yu Ting Hao Ling, Ting Hao Da Yu. Xiao Yu Ting Hao Ling, 2 hash is greater than. We put her in a state facility. Let her rot. She is useless to us after we get the money. Xiao Yu Ting Hao Ling, Ting Hao Da Yu. The recording played on. Every word was a hammer blow. The casual cruelty, the admission of the plan, the laughter. I looked at Sarah. She was not crying anymore. She was staring at Mike with a look of pure hatred. Mike was staring at the floor, his face the color of a tomato. And Brenda? Brenda looked like a statue that was crumbling from the inside out. The audio ended with the sound of a door closing. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. The only sound in the room was the hum of the air conditioning. Judge Moore took off her glasses. She looked at Brenda Vance. The look was not one of judicial impartiality. It was a look of disgust. Mistress Vance, the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. did you just perjure yourself in my courtroom? Saouding Haoling. 2 is greater than that, is not. Saouding Haoling. 2, Brenda stammered. She looked at her lawyer. Do something. Sterling stood up, but he looked defeated. Your Honor, I request a recess. Denied. Judge Moore snapped. She slammed her gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. This court has heard enough. The judge said, the petition for permanent conservatorship is denied with prejudice. Furthermore, I am vacating the temporary order effective immediately. Miss Miller, your rights are fully restored. She turned her gaze to the bailiff. Bailiff, please lock the doors. I am holding the petitioner, Brenda Vance, and her associates Michael and Sarah Vance in contempt of court pending a criminal investigation. No, Sarah screamed. She jumped up, pointing a finger at Mike. It was him. It was his idea. He got the drugs. I told him not to. You shut up, Mike yelled back. You wanted the money for the honeymoon. Silence. The judge roared. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Police officers were moving in. Brenda was still sitting in the witness box, gripping the wood, muttering to herself. I sat perfectly still in the middle of the storm. Davis turned to me. A slow, tired smile spread across his face. We did it, kid, he said. I looked at Aunt Brenda one last time as the officer approached her with handcuffs. She looked up and locked eyes with me. For a moment, I expected to see anger. I expected to see the monster, but I only saw fear. She was small. She was pathetic. She was just a greedy old woman who had bet everything on me being weak. And she had lost. I stood up. My legs were steady. The shivering had stopped. Thank you, Mr. Davis, I said. My voice was clear. But we are not done yet. We are not? Davis asked. No, I said, watching them lead my family away in cuffs. They took my mother's necklace, and I want it back. The judge was banging her gavel, trying to restore order, but I did not hear it. All I could hear was the sound of chains breaking. The nightmare was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The sound of the heavy wooden doors of the courthouse closing behind me should have sounded like victory. It should have sounded like the final note of a triumphant symphony. Instead, it sounded like the lid of a coffin slamming shut. I stepped out onto the concrete steps, blinking against the harsh afternoon sun. Beside me, Arthur Davis lit a cigarette, his hands cupping the flame against the wind. He looked exhausted. I felt hollow. I expected silence. I expected the world to be exactly as I had left it 3 hours ago. I was wrong. A wall of noise hit us. It was a cacophony of shouting voices and the rapid-fire clicking of camera shutters. A swarm of reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers had gathered at the bottom of the steps. They surged forward like a tide as soon as they saw me. Kate, over here. Is it true your aunt tried to poison you? How do you feel about your cousin facing felony charges? Kate, look this way. Give us a smile. I recoiled, stepping back toward the safety of the doors. These were the vultures. A week ago, they would have been writing headlines about the drunk bridesmaid who ruined a wedding. Today, I was the martyr. I was the Cinderella story with a dark, twisted ending. Ignore them, Davis grunted, blowing a stream of gray smoke into the air. Do not say a word. Walking to the car is going to feel like running a gauntlet. Keep your head down. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder and guided me down the stairs. The microphones were shoved in my face. Black foam heads, looking like distinctive weapons. I saw my own reflection in the camera lenses. Pale, wide-eyed, stripped bare, we pushed through the crowd. I heard snippets of questions that made my stomach turn. Did you know about the gambling debts? Are you going to sue for the inheritance? What do you have to say to Sarah? I said nothing. I climbed into Davis's battered sedan and locked the door. As we pulled away, I watched the crowd through the rear window. They were already turning their attention to the courthouse doors, waiting for the next act, waiting for Brenda. I opened my phone. It was a mistake, but I could not stop myself. The internet moves faster than the law. The recording Davis had played in court, or at least a leaked transcript of it, was already trending on Twitter. The hashtag Justice for Kate was the #1 topic in the United States. I scrolled through the feed. A week ago, strangers had called me a junkie. They had dissected my appearance, mocked my trauma, and diagnosed me with every mental illness in the book. Now, those same strangers were posting lengthy apologies, or worse, pretending they had supported me all along. I always knew something was off about that aunt. One user wrote, "Look at her eyes in the wedding photos. Pure evil. That cousin is a monster." Another commented, "I found her registry. Who wants to buy her a prison jumpsuit instead of a toaster?" It was dizzying. It was nauseating. The public did not care about me. They just loved a villain. They loved to watch a woman like Brenda Vance, perfect, wealthy, judgmental, fall from grace. I was just the instrument of her destruction. I went home to my apartment. It felt different now. The air was lighter. The crushing weight of the debt was gone. But the silence remained. I turned on the television. The local news was broadcasting live from outside Brenda's estate in Greenwich. The reporter stood in front of the wrought iron gates. Behind her, I could see activity. Not the festive bustle of a wedding, but the chaotic dismantling of a life. Breaking news. The reporter said, her face grave. Police are currently executing a search warrant at the Vance residence. This comes just hours after a shocking courtroom revelation where Brenda Vance, a prominent figure in Greenwich society, was accused of drugging her own niece to cover up financial crimes. The camera zoomed in. I saw a tow truck backing into the driveway. It was hooking up Mike's luxury sports car. Sources say that the family is facing financial ruin. The reporter continued, with assets frozen pending the investigation. Creditors are moving in. We have also received word that the Greenwich Country Club has held an emergency board meeting to revoke Mistress Vance's membership, citing a violation of their moral conduct clause. I watched as a police officer walked out of the front door carrying a box, then another, then, finally, they brought them out. Brenda came first. She was not wearing handcuffs yet, but she looked like a prisoner. Her hair was messy, her linen suit rumpled. She held a hand up to shield her face from the cameras, a gesture of futility against the high-definition lenses capturing her shame. Then came Sarah and Mike. They were not walking together. They were standing on opposite sides of the driveway, shouting at each other. The microphones did not pick up the words, but the body language was clear. Sarah was screaming. She shoved Mike in the chest. Mike threw his hands up and walked away toward a police cruiser. The fairy tale was dead. The perfect family was eating itself alive on live television. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Kate, please, you have to tell them to stop. They are threatening us. People are throwing bricks at the house. Mom is having a heart attack. Please, pick up." It was Sarah. I stared at the message. I imagined her sitting in that beautiful, empty house, watching the lights of the news vans flicker through the curtains, terrified and alone. I remembered how she had looked at me in the hospital. I remembered the invoice for $50,000. I remembered her laugh when Mike said I should rot in a state facility. I felt a flicker of pity. It was small and weak, like a dying ember. But then I remembered the taste of the wine. I remembered the feeling of my mind shattering into a million pieces while they watched. I did not reply. I did not block the number. I simply deleted the message. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights. I was free. The conservatorship was dead. The debt was gone. My reputation was being scrubbed clean by the same mob that had dirtied it. But as I stood there, I realized that freedom was not happy. Freedom was cold. Freedom was lonely. I had won the war, but the battlefield was covered in ash. My family was gone, not just the toxic parts, but the history, the holidays, the memories of my mother that were tied to that house and those people. They had burned it all down for money. And now, I was standing in the soot. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. My hands were steady. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The criminal trial, the depositions, the fight to recover the necklace. But for tonight, I would watch them fall on the television screen. The camera panned back to the house. A landscaping truck had pulled up. A man in work boots was planting a sign in the perfectly manicured lawn. It was not a for sale sign. It was a foreclosure notice. I took a sip of water. It tasted clean. It tasted like truth. Goodbye, Aunt Brenda. I whispered to the empty room. I turned off the television, plunging the apartment into darkness. For the first time in weeks, I was not afraid of the dark. I was the one holding the switch. The detective's office was a small, windowless box that smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner. I sat on a hard plastic chair, my hands resting on my knees. I was not handcuffed. I was not a suspect. And yet, I felt like I was waiting for a sentence to be passed. Lieutenant Baker walked in. He was a heavy-set man with kind eyes that looked too tired for his face. He carried a brown cardboard box in one hand and a thick file folder in the other. He sat down opposite me, placing the items on the metal table with a heavy thud. "We finished the search of the Greenwich property this morning," Baker said. His voice was soft, careful. "We found quite a few things. Kate, hidden accounts, offshore wire transfers, evidence of insurance fraud. Your aunt was running a very sophisticated shell game." I nodded. It did not surprise me. Greed was a hungry animal. It needed to be fed constantly. "But we also found this," Baker said. He reached into the box and pulled out a clear plastic evidence bag. He slid it across the table. Inside, resting against the plastic, was a sapphire necklace. I stopped breathing. It looked exactly as I remembered it. The midnight blue stone, deep and endless as an ocean. The halo of diamonds. The one missing stone on the bottom right petal. It was smaller than it had seemed in my memory, but heavier. It carried the weight of a ghost. It was in a wall safe behind a painting in the master bedroom. Baker explained. She had it wrapped in a velvet cloth. I reached out and touched the plastic. My fingertips went cold. "There is something else," Baker said. He opened the file folder. "When we found the necklace, we had to ask ourselves a question. This item was listed on the police report from 2 years ago as lost in the crash that killed your parents. The assumption was that the force of the impact threw it from the vehicle, or it was washed away by the river." He paused, watching me closely. "So, We pulled the old case files. We cross-referenced the timeline of the accident with the digital forensics from your aunt's phone, which we seized yesterday. What are you saying? I whispered. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The accident report states that the crash occurred at approximately 10:15 at night, Baker said, tapping a piece of paper. The first call to 911 was recorded at 10:38. That is a 23-minute gap. I stared at him. The road was deserted. It took time for someone to drive by. No, Baker said. Brenda's phone pings place her at the scene, specifically at the bridge. At 10:17, 2 minutes after the car went over the rail, the room spun. A high-pitched ringing started in my ears. She was there. I breathed. She was there. Baker confirmed. She was there for 21 minutes before she called for help. She did not go down the embankment to check for a pulse. She did not try to pull them out. According to the accelerometer on her phone, she climbed down, stayed by the driver's side window for approximately 6 minutes, and then climbed back up to the road. I closed my eyes. The image burned into my brain, vivid and horrifying. My mother, bleeding, broken, trapped in the twisted metal. My father, unconscious or dying. And Brenda, my own flesh and blood, climbing through the wreckage, not to hold her sister's hand, not to apply pressure to a wound. She was there to steal. She had seen her sister dying, and her first instinct was to reach for the necklace. She had unclasped the gold chain from my mother's cooling skin. She had slipped it into her pocket, and then she had stood there, in the dark, listening to the silence, waiting for them to die so she could inherit the trust fund. She did not kill them with a weapon. She killed them with time. We are upgrading the charges, Baker said. His voice sounded far away, like he was speaking from the other end of a long tunnel. In addition to the fraud, the theft, and the poisoning, the district attorney is looking at charges of depraved indifference and manslaughter. She will never see the outside of a prison cell again. Kate, I felt a tear slide down my cheek. It was hot, like acid, and the others. I asked, Sarah? Mike? Sarah claimed she knew nothing about the accident. Baker said, but she was in possession of stolen property. And Mike, Saritsing Ling, 2# is greater than well. Mike is singing like a bird to get a plea deal. He is giving us everything on Brenda. I looked down at the necklace. It was beautiful. It was hideous. Can I take it? I asked. Technically, it is evidence, Baker said, but the district attorney cleared it. We have photographed it. We have the serial number. It belongs to you. He opened the bag. I reached in and pulled the necklace out. The gold was cool to the touch. I held it in my palm, feeling the sharp edges of the diamonds. I thought I would feel relief. I thought I would feel some sort of closure, knowing that the monster had been caught, but I felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness. My parents were still dead. My aunt was a sociopath who had watched them die. My cousin was a stranger. The family dinners, the Christmases, the memories of the last 2 years, they were all tainted. Every hug Brenda had given me, every bowl of soup, every smile. Saritsing Ling, 2# is greater than it was all a performance over the graves of the people she let die. I stood up. My legs felt wooden. Thank you, Lieutenant, I said. Do you have someone to call? Baker asked, concern etching his forehead. Someone to drive you home? No, I said. I do not. I walked out of the station into the gray twilight. The city was moving on. Cars were honking. People were rushing to dinner. Life was churning forward. I clutched the necklace in my hand until the metal dug into my skin. I had won. I had destroyed them. I had reclaimed my inheritance and my name. But as I walked down the concrete steps, alone, in the crowd, I realized the truth. You can win the war, but you cannot unsee the battlefield. The Kate Miller who had walked into that wedding a week ago was gone. She had died in that hospital bed. The woman walking down the street now was rich, vindicated, and free. But she was also an orphan in a way she had never been before. I put the necklace in my pocket. It felt like carrying a stone. The sentencing hearing was shorter than the wedding ceremony. It took the judge exactly 10 minutes to dismantle the empire Aunt Brenda had spent 40 years building. When the gavel finally fell, the sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. 20 years. That was the price for the fraud, the theft, and the depraved indifference that had cost my parents their lives. I watched the bailiffs lead her away. Brenda did not scream this time. She did not cry. She looked old. The pristine blonde hair was showing gray at the roots, and her shoulders, usually square and proud, were slumped in defeat. She did not look at me as she passed. She stared at the floor, a ghost haunting her own life. I walked out of the courtroom and did not look back. I did not stick around to see Sarah and Mike. I heard through the grapevine, which in our small town meant the whispers at the grocery store, that Mike had taken a plea deal for 3 years in minimum security. Sarah was not charged, but she was serving a sentence of a different kind. I saw her once, a few days before I left Connecticut. I was stopping for gas at a cheap station on the edge of town. I went inside to pay. There was a woman scrubbing the counter, wearing a stained polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her nails, once manicured to perfection, were chipped and raw. It was Sarah. She looked up as the bell on the door chimed. Our eyes met. For a second, I saw the old arrogance flare up, the instinct to sneer, but it died instantly, suffocated by the reality of her life. She was the daughter of a felon, the wife of a convict, bankrupt and social pariah. I did not say hello. I did not buy the pack of gum I had come in for. I simply turned around and walked out. Her misery was not my problem anymore. I sold everything. The estate, the house in Greenwich, the furniture, the cars. I liquidated every asset Brenda had tried to control. The money was substantial. It was enough to never work another day in my life if I chose. But I did not want the money for luxury. I wanted it for distance. I moved 3,000 miles away to a small coastal town in Oregon. The air here is different. It smells of salt and pine, sharp and clean. I bought a small cottage on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It is nothing like the cold, imposing mansions of Connecticut. It is warm. It is mine. I am not fixed. I know that. I see a therapist twice a week. Her name is Dr. Evans. We talk about the nightmares that still wake me up at 3 a.m. We talk about the guilt I feel for surviving when my parents did not. We talk about the anger that still sits in my chest, a hot coal that refuses to cool down completely. Recovery is not a straight line. Some days, I cannot get out of bed. Some days, I doubt my own memories. The gaslighting left deep cracks in my foundation, and it will take years to patch them. But today is a good day. I sit on my back porch, wrapped in a thick wool blanket against the morning chill. The fog is rolling off the ocean, revealing the gray, churning water below. In my hand, I hold a steaming mug of chamomile tea. No wine, no alcohol. I have not touched a drop since that day at the wedding. I do not need to numb the world anymore. I want to feel it. I want to feel the cold wind on my face and the heat of the ceramic mug in my palms. I reach into my pocket and pull out the sapphire necklace. I do not wear it. I do not think I ever will. It belongs to a past that is too heavy to carry around my neck, but I keep it close. It is a reminder. It is a reminder that I was right. It is a reminder that I am strong. It is a reminder that the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, will always find a way to the surface. I take a sip of tea and watch a seagull dive into the waves. I lost a family. I lost my innocence. But as I sit here, breathing in the salt air, listening to the silence that belongs only to me, I realize I have gained something far more valuable. I have my life back. And for the first time in 25 years, the pen is in my hand. The story is mine to write.